Hello and welcome to season two of the Rejection Diaries. My name's Stuart White, and I'm joined with me tonight by Matt Cuyes, who's going to speak to us a little bit about his experience with writing, his journey up to date, and how he has managed rejection and how he's responded to that. So I'm really delighted to have you on with us tonight, Matt.
Thank you for having me. No, looking forward to it.
Great. Could you first of all just tell everyone who's listening a little bit about you and your writing up to this point?
Yeah, sure. So I've started my writing journey probably about just over 7 years ago, and I write. The vast majority of what I've written is are picture books, but I have also dipped into early readers a little bit, and maybe possibly something I'd explore in the future. But for the vast majority of my writing has been concentrated around picture books. I guess it's difficult to really pinpoint exactly where my writing journey started as such, but I used to work as a tennis coach, and the age group that I used to really enjoy was the mini tennis, which is kind of about years 4 to 6. And when I was doing the coaching, obviously at that age you can't be too technical. There's a lot of sort of visual actions, and also you kind of their attention span isn't always great. So for an hour session, you sort of need to mix it up a little bit. And I remember looking through a list of exercises of games and things that we got given, and I thought I just felt like it was missing a bit of excitement or a spark. It didn't seem that kid friendly. So I just sort of, as I went along, I sort of planning my sessions with some games that I'd kind of invented, and I sort of made up all these little sort of rhyming lines like keep the ball in to avoid the shark fin. If you hit it out, be careful, sharks about. And I just really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then I eventually ended up retraining as a radiographer, and I stopped doing the tennis coaching, and with changeable shift patterns and things, I couldn't really commit to it in my spare time. And I missed getting in that headspace really, especially with that age group. And then I just remember one night I was sort of looking to find something for me, because I think so much of what we do has external influences, whether that be parental or friends or whatever. And I just kind of was looking for something for me really. And then I was sitting at my desk one night, and just these two lines just popped into my head out of the blue. Legends speak of mighty monsters living in the deep. In underwater caverns they slumber asleep. Now, I know the scansion isn't great and one thing or another, but at the time, these two lines just popped into my head and they didn't want to seem to leave. So I started writing. I just wrote them down, and I went with it really. And then, so I wrote in secret, to be honest, for probably about close to 2 years. I wasn't brave enough to really admit to anyone that I was doing this. And then that's how it started. And then I'm probably 7 years down the line now, so there's a few things that I might try and pick up on later on tonight from there to where I am now, really.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's really I really enjoy actually hearing those sort of origin stories, if you like, and
Yeah,
where it all started for people, and it's wonderful you did all those little rhymes, and that's obviously where the idea of becoming a picture book writer came from, which is lovely to hear.
yeah.
So let's move on a little bit then to once you started writing and you'd maybe finished a book or two and you started then looking to put your work out there. What happened for you then?
Sure. So, yeah, I remember that the first time I really put my book out there was I actually stumbled across an evening where you could submit your work to an agent anonymously and then in advance, and then you could go along to an evening session, and they very kindly were giving up their time to provide the group with feedback. So there was a mixture at the meeting of people that had submitted, some people hadn't, but were just interested. And I thought, rather than just submitting straight away to an agent out the blue, I thought this would be a really good opportunity. Almost in a way, in my head at the time, I was thinking of getting my foot in the door, and I thought it would just be really useful to get that those expertise on it. So I was fortunate enough to be selected and to submit. And I remember going along to the evening, and I can remember, I was really proud of what I'd written. I was secretly, you kind of try not to, but you can't help but get your hopes up just that little bit. And I think I was very naive at the time, and I think that stands in my memory as definitely the most brutal rejection I think I've had. There was very little positive comments. There was very little I could draw upon, and it was very difficult to take at the time because I was so naive. And I think when you don't realise how competitive it is, then, and I hadn't really studied story structure at that point, so I think it was a crushing blow in a way. And I remember leaving the session and really thinking, is this for me? I'm really just not sure if I'm good enough to be a writer. But after a few sort of days, and I let it settle, I just tried to think of anything I could that I could build on from what he was saying. I mean, there was a lot of negative points to it, but the only thing that I could really draw on that I thought, well, this is something I can work on, is the fact that he's told me that the meter and the pattern of stresses of syllables was all over the place. And it was something that I didn't understand scansion or meter at the time. And I counted the syllables in every line, thinking it would then just match, but I didn't understand that the pattern of stresses of the syllables had to be the same throughout. And it took me a long time, really, but I wouldn't have probably ever realised that if I hadn't have had that feedback from the rejection. But that was definitely something where I thought, okay, this is something I need to definitely work on, and it's something that I need to look into more. And I really went away and tried to critique my own work, read more around how scansion and rhyme works, and then I just tried to take the positives where possible, even though, to be honest, there were very little at that point, and just move on, really. So that was probably the worst rejection I've had in some respects. So then I did that. I worked on it. I really tried to. I mean, now I've found things like Catherine Emmett has a fantastic blog on scansion. It really just puts it in layman's terms. It's so good. But at the time, it took me such a long time to find something, because a lot of stuff was really detailed about poetry that kind of was over my head. And looking back, I think definitely if I'd found something like that earlier, it would have made a lot more sense to me. So then the second, I guess, real significant rejection for me was probably then about a year and a half later, when I was subscribed to a publisher's email list, and then they were running a picture book masterclass. And I remember it wasn't cheap, but I thought, no, I'm going to treat myself. So I remember going along to that, and one of the really nice things about that was, again, you had the option of getting some feedback on your work as well as attending the workshop. So I thought, great, again, this is really useful to get some insight. So, but at this point now, as I look back, I really realised that the fact that it was just myself that was looking at my work, what I was really lacking was other people, other writers giving me advice and feedback. But I guess at that point I just wasn't 100% comfortable with sharing my work. And it's strange how I was okay submitting it to something like that, but I guess I knew that it was more anonymized and things. But the thought of just submitting it to a group was really something that I guess I wasn't 100% comfortable with at the time. So anyhow, I remember going along to this workshop, and again, it was a little bit more positive. They said that they really liked my voice and they found the story really funny, but I hadn't really thought about it from a publishing perspective. And I do remember the editor saying that there was no way that this would ever be published, because I think the grandma had far too many close calls that she didn't really deserve, because she hadn't done anything wrong in the first place. So it wasn't really quite sending out the right message, even if it might be funny. So, but again, I felt like that was a bit more. I guess there's rejection is such a broad term, isn't it? And you can have a rejection that is very brutal and very negative, but in a way you can have almost a positive rejection, in the sense that, okay, it wasn't accepted, but if you get something back which then you can go on to work on or improve or learn, hone your skills, I think that in some ways you could take that as a positive as well as a negative. I guess it's what kind of spin you want to put on it. But I really enjoyed that event, and I also got speaking to other writers, and this is the first time really that I'd sort of been to anything where I wasn't just sort of writing on my own, but I was sort of sharing experiences and learning from other people. And I remember speaking to the guy who sat next to me, and it was eye-opening, because he told me he'd written 60 picture book texts minimum, and he had about 15 polished, and then he was asking how many I'd written. And I was like, well, just the one, I was completely oblivious, really. So then by this point, I think he was a bit exasperated and was like, so you're not even on Twitter then? There's a fantastic writing community on Twitter. And I was like, no. So moving on from that, I thought, okay, so I think this is definitely something that would help with my writing. I think it's probably something that I need. So I remember then joining Twitter. I found Write Mentor through Twitter quite early on. So this is probably about, I'd say, over 3 years ago now, maybe slightly longer than that. And I had submitted to a few agents by this point, but I think in my heart of hearts I knew it still wasn't quite ready. And I really then I've been writing purely in rhyme up until this point, and I found it quite inhibitive, because I was getting sort of stuck, and I was getting a little bit frustrated, and I was finding that I'd been working on this story for so long, and I just started trying something new, and I just thought, I'm just going to rewrite it in prose. I'm going to have a go at writing other stories and just see where that takes me. And that was just really enjoyable. I started really enjoying my writing again, started really, I think I was finding my own voice and my own way of writing. But again, I still had very little understanding at that point of how the story structure and the character transformation, and there was still a lot of elements lacking. But then I remember submitting to, and I think at that point I was like, well, I was starting to find out about competitions through Twitter, whether you're pitching, or whether that be the Write Mentor competition and the writing magazine picture book prize and things. So I entered, and again, I thought the Write Mentor picture book prize was a really good point, because you got feedback. So even if it wasn't accepted at the time, and again, it was great to get some child beta readers feedback and some feedback from adults. So I hadn't really heard of anything like that, and obviously writing for children, it's really nice to get their views as well. It was, again, I didn't get longlisted, but in some ways that rejection felt quite positive for me because I got 3 out of 4 yeses. I got some really, really good feedback as to how I could improve the story, how I could take it forwards. And I really it's tricky, isn't it? Because sometimes you get feedback and you're not so sure about it, and you're sort of umming and ahhing, and you can be quite precious over your own work and think, oh, I just don't know whether to make these changes or not. But the feedback that I got from that particular story, definitely, I thought, no, this is definitely really useful. I think this will improve the story a lot. I think it's possibly been lacking a little bit of, it's not really that sparky, and it just felt like it was missing something. And they gave me some really good ideas. So a year on, I'd written a few more stories again. I submitted quite a few. And this particular story, I thought I'd really worked on hard, I'd really improved. And again, I couldn't quite, but secretly I was getting my hopes up, and I really thought, I had 3 out of 4 yeses. I really think I've improved it. Really, you never quite know. And then I didn't make the long list for any of them. And I think that rejection hurt quite a bit because I felt like as a writer, I had really improved. But in some ways, I think from the feedback and the results that I got, I actually almost felt like what that was telling me was that I'd regressed. And I knew that wasn't the case, but I felt like having come pretty close the year before, I think that was gutting, and that was, that was really quite tough to take with some of the stories that I then submitted the year after, getting no yeses and things. And so again, that rejection was tough, but I just let it settle. And I remember then listening to the shortlisted and the winners at the award ceremony, and they were all brilliant. The standard was so high, and but I definitely remember Stephen, when he gave a bit of a speech at the end, talking about all the people that had helped on his writing journey, and from whether that be mentors, whether that be critique groups. And then it just sort of clicked in my head that really I've still not really shared this story with anyone else, or any of my stories with anyone else. I've just been writing and trying to work on it myself. But maybe this was the time that I needed to just be more prepared to put myself out there and get other people's insights into it. So I think having come so close the previous year, and then felt like I'd improved it, and then almost that feeling of that I was almost not as close second time round, that rejection in a way was the push I needed. And I don't think I would have honestly joined a critique group or be willing to put myself out there as much if I hadn't felt like I'd come so close and then had that rejection second time round. So, and I know a lot of people say this, but I genuinely do believe that joining a critique group has helped me in so many ways that I didn't think it would. And it really, when I started the group, I really wanted to make sure that I was giving people solid advice. So that meant going away and really looking myself at how to critique a text. And then all of a sudden I started to look at my own work with, almost like a fresh pair of eyes. And I really started to see elements of my story where it wasn't really fulfilling the criteria of what a picture book should entail. And, there's certain no-nos. For example, if a child couldn't empathise with the main character, if it's not almost from a child's point of view in a way, it's very difficult for somebody to take on a text like that, and lots of things that I was sort of learning about, really. I mean, some of my stories didn't even have a clear problem, and I guess not all picture books have that character transformation, but I think as somebody who's trying to get their work noticed, I certainly think it helps then going away and looking at exactly how stories are structured. And I also push myself to go on courses to learn more. And again, this was all through Twitter. So it's though I think those rejections really, in a way, have got me to the point where I'm at today. And I genuinely think that I wouldn't have been ready to be a published writer without those rejections. So in some ways, I'm not grateful for them, but I think it's helped me push myself outside my comfort zone and really, you know, it's massively influenced who I am as a writer today.
I just wanted to ask in response to that then. So where does the drive or the motivation to continue writing, despite all those setbacks and so on, where does that come from? What's the fire in your belly that keeps you going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with me, I really think it's the fact that when you read your story or share your story or even tell your story, it's the fact that knowing that it's something that you've created from an idea in your head, just a tiny idea, and that it's not come from anywhere else. It's something purely organically that you've created and a story that you're telling. And I also think it's just really nice sometimes to be creative and just little snippets of real life, and then just to look round where you are or hear a snippet of a conversation, and just it's amazing how you get a bit of inspiration from that. And it's weird in a way, because I feel like some of my stories are almost, I've not almost had to think too much about them, really. In a way, some of them have almost written themselves in a strange way. And I think, I never quite know what my next story is going to be or what the idea is going to be until I sort of just start jotting things down. But I guess it's just something that I really enjoy, and to be published would be wonderful. But if it never happens, I think it's still something that I think I'll carry on doing regardless. And yeah, I think it's very satisfying even now. I really enjoy sharing it at a critique group and seeing what people think. Whereas at one point I would have dreaded to think what they would say. So yeah, I guess it's just the fact that it's come from you. It's something that you're putting out there, and that somebody next to you who was writing a story would put something probably completely different, and it's just something that you can share, really. So I think that's quite special in many ways. And I think with picture books, I guess I was thinking a lot, actually. I'm going slightly off on a tangent here. I hope that's all right.
Yeah, keep going.
But
that's fine.
I was trying to think of why I was so reluctant to tell people that I was writing for children, and I think it's taken a while to realise why. And I think one of the reasons is that I think because I wasn't particularly well read, I almost felt like I wasn't good enough to be a writer, because I felt like other people had a lot of background knowledge, were really clued up on a lot of books, and read an awful lot from an early age. And I do remember at a time I was living in Oxford, and I remember going to a few sort of talks and things that this place called the Story Museum, which is it's a fantastic venue, and it's a wonderful museum and exhibition for inspiring young children to get into that creative space and to write. I felt like I was very different to a lot of the panelists in the sense that I felt like a lot of people were saying, you know, I've always loved stories ever since I've been little, and I knew I always wanted to be a writer. And I think in my heart of hearts, I felt like, well, that wasn't me. And I think I didn't feel like, I guess I just didn't feel like I was good enough really to do that. And I just felt like I was cheating myself because I hadn't necessarily had those experiences growing up. But I think there came a point when actually I just sort of let go of all that and said, you know what, if I enjoy it, that's all that matters. I'm going to carry on with it and you know, and keep going. I'm still learning now. I recently went on the picture book course with Claire, which was fantastic. And again, that's completely changed the way I think I would critique my own work and and yeah, it's opened my eyes to different things. So you know, I'm still learning lots as we go, but yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's such a important thing, isn't it? That drive to keep learning, keep improving, and so on, and all the time. And actually, one of the things that I
Yeah,
really liked about what you said there was when you talked about creation is almost like a form of therapy. You know, it gives you that sort
yeah,
of therapeutic buzz that helps to heal over those wounds that come from rejection. You know, almost like an
yeah,
anesthetic to and against rejection. And yeah, it was lovely hearing you talk about that because you know I feel in a very similar way that the only real way to get
yeah.
over rejection is just to bury yourself in the next project and you know continue
Yeah.
to create, which is why we all do it. I think.
I think that's a really good point, and I think when I've had two very difficult rejections, I think having something, whether that be booking on a course or, you know, something that you think, well, actually, this is an opportunity to learn from that rejection. I think, or, you know, doing it, going to an event with other writers, I think that does really help because you very quickly realise you're not on your own. There's a lot of people that have been in that situation, and you might be quite fortunate in some ways because there may be some people that have been writing for a lot longer than you that you know are still on that journey and still battling, you know. So I definitely think, um, you know, for me, courses have definitely been something that have helped me overcome rejection because I've realised, well, actually, I didn't know this and I didn't know that, and I've learned this and that. So, and I can apply that to my writing and think, well, maybe next time I submit, my stories will hopefully be stronger for those reasons. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Matt, that's us come to roughly the end of the episode. I just wanted to say thanks for coming on and speaking to me and being so honest and giving us such an insight into your whole journey so far. And there's some real gems of advice and tips in there for other writers who are listening. So hopefully there's a lot of benefit for the people listening into this as well.
Oh, no, honestly, thank you. No, I really appreciate it. And as I say, I think Write Mentor has helped me so much as a writer. So if I can, it's nice to give something back or you know, even to be a part of. I remember listening to series one of the Rejection Diaries, and I actually, when I listened to it, I didn't think I'd be able to do this and come forward and speak about my own experiences. But you know, it's I think it's good in a way just to share your experience. Everyone's got different experiences, but no, I really appreciate everything you do with Right Mentor. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of episode 3 of season 2 of the Rejection Diaries. Thanks to Matt for joining me, and we'll see you next time. May the force be with you.